Hello and welcome to the i3 lecture series hosted by the Masters in Digital Photography program at the School of Visual Arts. Today we're thrilled to welcome Elisa Koppelman. Elisa is a photo editor and photo book consultant based in Austin, Texas. Most recently, Elisa was promoted to the position of Deputy Art Director at Harper's Magazine. Congratulations. Elisa has also worked as an art researcher for Oxford American Magazine, which won the National Magazine Award for General Excellence in 2016, and has since been nominated, and the magazine has since been nominated twice in the category. Working directly with photographers, Elisa provides oversight in editing, sequencing, design, and editorial aspects of portfolios and photo book projects. She also works regularly as an archival researcher on the Emmy-nominated PBS NewsHour series, Brief but Spectacular. Aileen Smithson, past thesis project advisor for our program, wrote of Elisa on Lens Scratch. She is an astute observer and consumes thousands of photographs on a weekly basis. She has an in-depth knowledge of contemporary photography and is skilled at sequencing, editing, and ultimately crafting images into a beautiful visual language. She truly understands the power of a photograph. Please help join me in welcoming Elisa Koppelman.
Hi, thank you, Tom, for the lovely intro, and thanks for having me here. So I guess I will launch right into it. I like to talk about how I got into this career because it's really a roundabout sort of meandering path, especially for students. I like to sort of illustrate that things aren't a straight line. You've probably already experienced that, but also that there are different avenues you can take along the way that will be equally valuable and fruitful for you. So I am going to share my screen. All right, so in my early career, so I didn't study photography, I studied film. I studied criticism and history of cinema in college. Mainly because I liked, the moving image. I liked still images and also had kind of no clue what else I wanted to do. I was lucky to have parents who, or at least a father, my mother was more realistic, but a father who encouraged me to just do what I wanted to do what I loved, because he had had a career his whole life that he didn't love, and he regretted that always. So that's my background. That is why I majored in something that had really no actual sort of job connected to it once I graduated. I had no interest in going to grad school. I was interested in filmmaking, but I was not interested in going to Los Angeles and working on, sort of what I saw as just mainstream cinema. Like I said, I had studied history and criticism, so I was very snobby at that point about movies. So I ended up, moving around a bit, and then I ended up with an internship on a friend's movie. He had gotten a budget to direct. It was a very small budget, but for me, very exciting. I was at the time living in New York, because I had been a nanny. That was one of the stops on my journey in my early 20s. And I knew I didn't want to do that for more than a year. And so when I got the chance to work on this film, I thought, well, I'm going to jump on it. Then it turns out, well, we don't really have budget to hire you. It's a low budget. We didn't build this position into, our plans. So I thought, well, in film school, they teach you have to pay your dues. And so I volunteered to intern on the movie. And for me, that ended up being the right thing to do because I met people that I ended up being working with continually. And Unfortunately, it was a very low budget operation. It did not lead anywhere good. So this is my life before photo editing, just briefly. For example, I worked on this fine film. You can see 1-star rating, bad, very bad. I did learn about set dressing. I learned about framing to a lens. I learned about, what it takes to sort of put this machine together. But I also knew that I didn't want to stay in this line of work if this is what it meant, working on things like this. It did get a little better, but it really didn't get much better. So this is where I found myself. And when I moved to New York, I continued to want to work in film production, but my connections there were almost none. I had one connection and another connection who mostly spent time in LA working because that's where most of the film production work was. At that particular time, also, there was sort of a writer's strike looming. They weren't really funding new movies in the same way that they had been. It was a lull basically in production. And so I moved because I wanted to, and then I sort of ran into this roadblock. So needing to work, I had been reading Harper's Magazine all the time in, my sort of semi-employed time. And I finally noticed that they had an ad for an art internship. So, so I applied. The deadline was like 2 days later or something. So I kind of freaked out, did everything in the application. It's can be sort of an elaborate application, and I got the job. I ended up doing at first sort of like scanning galleries for pictures they might want to use, like very, of course, low level, no decision making, but sort of bringing as much art in for them to see as possible. Them being the art director and the assistant art director, because Harper's is and has always been pretty much a 1 to 2 person art department. So, so I got lucky, really. Again, timing, right, is very crucial in life. And I ended up being still an intern when the art director left. The assistant art director was moved up, and I was hired on as the assistant art director. And I, started getting to look for things like, this was something I saw in a gallery and sort of kept the announcement card forever. This is a Spanish artist, Chema Mados. I'm sure I'm butchering his name. And point being that I started, looking all over the place for art, and that trained me to sort of be able to connect it to text in a subtle way, sometimes maybe a not so subtle way, sometimes depending on what the text called for. And I did that for a number of years. I ended up moving to Austin, Texas, where I live now, simply because New York is a grind and Harper's is a nonprofit, and those two things after a while don't really go together very well. And so when I moved to Austin, I was able to keep my job at Harper's, and but it became part-time. So I was no longer doing any of the production oriented tasks, and instead I was pretty much just focused on art research. And so that at that point, so I'm going to back up a few slides here, I ended up being able to take on other clients. So I was able to do research for, Oxford American, who, as you heard Tom say, is another major client of mine. I also look for fine art, so I'm not just a photo person. To me, it's, the same language in a way. We could argue about that all day, I'm sure. And so the general thing that I do when I'm looking for work is, like for this, for example, this artist, we hadn't quite found the cover that was right for the issue. Because I'm more just of an art researcher at Oxford American, I'm not necessarily, the editor in chief is the one who is more in charge of, okay, what is the tone of the whole issue? What do we want to reflect? What is the mood of the stories overall in the issue? And what has been the trajectory of our past, covers, and what might we want to see this time around? So for this one, there were several covers that, we all liked, but they kind of didn't hit all of those marks. And so I got lucky when I went back to search. And while I was, searching, part of searching absolutely is procrastinating and going down all of the rabbit holes. This particular one came out of a rabbit hole when I went to N+1 magazine. I haven't read them in a while, but I decided to at the moment that I was supposed to be researching, because sometimes you need to do that. And I saw this artist's work. It wasn't this piece, I don't believe, and I thought it was stunning. So I plopped it into layout and pitched it, and here we are. That's our summer issue cover. So I don't know necessarily where these, inspirations are going to come from, or where possibilities are going to arise. It's sort of like, sometimes it feels like I need to be looking all the time and paying attention all the time, and not necessarily taking notes. But if I'm very organized, yes. But generally, like the books behind me, they're a great resource. Same thing online. Instagram is an amazing resource. It has become an incredible resource. And I also have kept my own keyworded database for many years. And so I pull from that constantly. I'll enter, for example, Prince photos, Alan Beaulieu, and then this article about Prince comes up. I can go to the database and look through everything I've logged, and if pull images and share them with my art director and see what might fit. That is something that happens all the time. So I am constantly proposing work that I saw 10, 15 years ago, quite often, along with work that I've just seen. This was actually, I will say, so it's a bizarre short story about a mattress store at the beginning, but it takes this whole trajectory, and it's basically about a couple divorcing. And it was difficult to find anything with the keyword mattress, under fine art photography. I don't even remember how this came up, but we were grateful it did. And so this is to show you that it is not all fun, what I do. Sometimes I am also looking for, 10,000 pictures of Ted Cruz or something similar. There was a Harper's cover that we needed the back of Donald Trump's head. And so I was, it's hard to isolate just the back of his head. So you have to sort of see him for days. Not my idea of a good time, but kind of fun when you find the picture that fits the tone. So from here, I want to sort of show you, I'm going to go to a different folder real quick. So to show you like my research process, this is a group of images of oranges, not this particular one that ended up in the magazine, but for Oxford American a few years ago, there was a story about Florida orange groves, and I didn't know much more about it. Sometimes when I start my research, I don't have the text yet. Usually when I research, ideally, I'm able to read through the story. Even if I get a pretty good idea from the editor, a few paragraphs or something, of what the story is going to be about. It always changes the way I research on what I'm looking for if I'm able to read the entire thing, because there are so many nuances when you know, when you get to go through an entire story. So this was a story that I didn't really know the tone of the picture that I would be looking for. So when we go through these, you're going to notice they're radically different. And that was on purpose. Um, you know, like obviously those aren't going to be for the same story, right? So I didn't really know what it was. Because the story was set in an orange grove in Florida, my real goal was to find a picture made in an orange grove in Florida, ideally by a Floridian photographer. So when I'm searching, I kind of start very, very narrow and then widen out as much as I need to until I've found enough images, or I think, okay, we've got some good possibilities here. Let's see what the art director thinks. If it doesn't match up, then you know, I'll have to go back and do another round of looking. And so for this one, you know, since I was keeping it so narrow, uh, I really didn't have a lot of images that, you know, sort of fit it. Like this has nothing to do with Florida. I'm not even totally sure that's an orange. Um, so this is Florida, but that was kind of one of the only ones I knew. Roe Etheridge and also Roe Etheridge. And so I went to Instagram and this is my first sort of real in-depth Instagram search using hashtags. And I started narrow, you know, Florida oranges, for Florida orange grove, Florida photographers, Florida orange photos, all sorts of things. They didn't bring up a lot. I really, you know, once I went to like oranges, Florida oranges, I was looking on my laptop, so I had a larger screen. It wasn't just the phone, and I can do a pretty quick scroll through. And the images that are clearly made by an artist very much do stand out in the flow, even when there are small squares. It's just very easy to see them amongst everybody's vacation photos that they've so kindly tagged. And so I ended up by that time, I was, you know, still digging, still looking, and I finally had the story in hand. So I had read it and it was like, okay, well, this is no, it's a very like moody first person, not a memoir, but it's like a sort of memoirish piece, kind of haunting. This maybe could have been a fit. This was not a fit. You know, it's once you get the text, it's like, okay, it becomes very clear. This is no way going to fit. This ended up actually being the image we used, taken by a British photographer in a Florida orange grove. And Alex Catt is the photographer, C-A-T-T. I was not familiar with his work. And, you know, since then I'm able to follow him. We haven't published him again, but, you know, I'm now aware of his larger bodies of work. I'm able to sort of track what he does, check in on what he's doing from time to time. And, you know, this is all because of Instagram hashtags. And we do pay for publications. So this is sort of my way of saying this is another potential income stream for any of you that are, you know, looking for that, which I assume some of you are through your photography, is one way to get art directors and photo editors to find your work is by carefully hashtagging your images. It's a huge pain to do when you're just starting out. Once you get going, you know, it becomes easier. It becomes just sort of rote. It becomes part of what you do. And you know, as you're posting one photo, to hashtag one photo as you post is not that big of a deal. I strongly suggest that any of you who are not doing that do start doing that, because it's a great way. And I would say with hashtags, it's good to have, depending on how general a general hashtag would be. So for example, with this, I don't know that hashtagging just oranges would really get you anywhere. It did get him somewhere that he did hashtag Florida oranges, even though that turned up millions of photos. You know, so for this photograph, it was a good general hashtag. I would also advise, when you're in, you know, geotagging is another way that I search for things. If I'm looking for images for, especially, it only ever comes up with a smaller town, or extremely specific location. I will search what images have been tagged to that location to see if I can find usable photos for publication that have already been taken. Depending on the import of the story, depending on how much budget we have, depending on how much time we have, depending on how much page space we have in each issue, you know, that all impacts when we're able to commission and when we're not. Another huge consideration is there already existing work that we think we can use that is a good fit? In both magazines I work for, we don't really feature portraits very often. Sometimes we do, but quite often the tone, you know, the story, it's not hinging on having a portrait of the person in the story. So if we send a photographer somewhere to photograph, quite often it's more, you know, they're photographing the scene of, you know, what does this town feel like? Where are the places that the events take place? That type of thing. Most recently, we sent Isaac Diggs to Birmingham, and he did actually make some beautiful portraits of people in the story, but they also sort of play along with, you know, what's in their environment and that type of thing. So that's my spiel about hashtags and geotagging. It's, you know, I consider it extremely important. Okay, oranges. So I also want to show you, want to show you a few PDFs from recent issues of Harper's. Two are researched pieces and one was commissioned. Sort of also to give you, okay, we'll do this one. We'll do this one first. Okay. All right. So this story, as you can see, why America's national parks need new management. Our first thought with this story was, you know, it's that we might want to commission it, except that, you know, commissioning during COVID is, you know, radically different than commissioning any other time that you normally would. So often also when we're going to commission a photographer, we'll do a round of research to sort of make sure there's not some fantastic story out there already, that, you know, someone's shot about the place or story. This ended up being a research piece that incorporated a lot of different photographers and artists. Part of that had to do with the edit that ended up happening. Some of the more specific parts came out, so it kind of opened us up to have a little bit more leeway with the type of work that we were going to feature. So this is at the front, it's Jesse Reeser. I knew that he had done a project on parks in the Grand Canyon. He lives in Arizona, and that he has some fantastic pictures. So these, I reached out to him and got him to send me, you know, more options than what I saw on his website. And this one ended up being the perfect one, just the mood of the ranger and, you know, his back sort of facing and sort of throngs of people around. It was kind of the perfect opener. On the lower left is Lori Nix and Kathleen Gerber. This project I was also aware of. You know, I've followed her work for a long time. Next to their work is Sandy Carson, who is a local photographer here in Austin, who I've worked with several times on photo book edits. And so I didn't remember his work right away, even though I've seen this picture hundreds of times. That's another thing to realize, is that there are so many photos going past my view every single day. And we're moving so quickly, and we have such a time crunch that sometimes what would seem like the most obvious thing to occur does not. So it took a bit, but I'm glad I thought of it. And so it did make it in. And then of course, this is Marklett and Byron Wolf. And another one by them. And that was the end of it. So when I do research like this, you know, it's a group effort. This one was a group effort with the art director. So I turned in research to her. I had proposed this for the first image and she liked that. And then she pulled the others, like she did the Marklett and Byron Wolf research, and I had found these other ones, and then she ended up putting these in the edit. So I'm going to show you next this commission. Philip Chung in Los Angeles is this fantastic photographer. Let's see if it'll go. It's not. All right. I'm not sure it's behaving right now. Yeah, that's okay. So this was a story that was coming up. We had several months lead time with this in terms of when the editors told us that the writer was going to be going to visit TikTok houses in Los Angeles. If you all don't know what TikTok houses are, because I didn't quite, you know, young influencers on TikTok that get sponsorships to feature products and just sort of be. I still don't quite get it, but a lot of them come to Los Angeles from wherever they grew up and move into these houses that their sponsors pay for. So like, don't ask me why there's a George Washington painting on the wall. I will never be able to tell you, or a disco ball, or, you know, but this magical thing happened. We were able to send Philip Chung, who lives in LA, who has done a lot of conflict photography. And he is very good at these scenes. He's a wonderful photographer, but he's especially good, in my point of view, on these scenes from far away, like capturing an overall feeling, tone, and people in motion in a really, really brilliant, wonderful way that sort of tells you everything you need to know. So let's see. So this was a very fun edit to do. We had way too many images to work with. It becomes difficult at that point, but it's a better problem to have, obviously, than if you don't have enough material to work with. I love sort of using these little vignettes like this, these plugs. It adds something, and if we can make space for images like this, I think it really enriches the edit. Sort of gives you sort of an extra view. So apparently this is what they do all day. And that's that. Sorry. I think that's it. excuse me, hat ad. And this, another researched piece. You know, I'm actually going to skip this because for some reason, this is not, preview is not allowing me to do 2 pages, and this one kind of needs it. Yeah, okay. I'll go through it though, 1 page at a time, since. So this was ended up being a piece about, you know, exactly what that subhead says. You know, are we living through another antebellum era? It's about this happening. So we knew that Victor J. Blue had been there because we, meaning Katie Humphreys, the art director of Harper's, and myself follow him on Instagram. So she reached out to him for photographs. We ended up using that full spread, as you can see. She knew that Isaac Diggs had been there. We reached out to him. And then they talk about the cyclorama at the Atlanta History Center. So this ended up being, you know, for me, not necessarily what you would like expect to be paired with this photo, which is kind of what I love about what I do. Sort of picking some unexpected little moments to keep the viewer engaged. Like, for example, it wouldn't be in my habit to sort of feature, you know, it was big news that Confederate flags are in the Capitol Rotunda, but I don't need to see it so blatantly. I feel like this type of image, especially like divided right in the middle with the police right there, and you can see it, but it's not in your face, is enough. It's more interesting, it's a more compelling photograph than sort of just flat, you know, Confederate flags waving around. And that sort of tends to be the kind of work that I'm drawn to. Okay, and then photo books. Am I doing okay on time? Tom? Yeah, okay. Let's see. Ooh, now one more commission here. Let's see. So this was a fun one. It was for a story. Oops. Okay. On a writer, Robinson Jeffers. And so for this one, he was a writer in the Bay Area in California in, you know, early 1900s through, this is 1948. And he was sort of this like moody, brooding figure. I honestly had never heard of him before I got to read this story. And for this one, so I had 3 issues last year that I was the acting art director for while my colleague was on leave. And, you know, this was really fun because I got to sort of figure, okay, well, I don't want just a straight illustration of him. I don't want to hire an illustrator. The existing photographs are beautiful, but they're, you know, from this life photo shoot, they're probably been published with stories about him, you know, at least every other time. What else can we do here? And I'm a big fan of Adrienne Hughes' work. She has, you know, made those like Iceland embroideries and that type of thing. And she had been posting a lot on Instagram, embroidering existing postcards and things like that, and sort of a lot more organic shapes and foliage. And she hadn't yet combined, so those sort of rays of thread that you're seeing coming out of the sky, that's the type of style she used with her her iceberg photos. And then the little knots are what she used with her sort of postcards that she was posting on Instagram. And a big feature of his work is they talk about in this review is, you know, is his relationship with the environment and sort of the molecules and what is happening right around him. And for me, this was a way to sort of get at this like cosmic but natural thing that was a tone of the piece. So we were able to commission 4 works from her, and we bought the photographs from, I believe they all came from Getty, bought high reses. She had them printed out with her printer that she uses. And then she embroidered them. And we had quite a bit of, you know, back and forth about the palette, about the placement of the sort of straight lines and the knots, how much should be going on or how little. This is Carmel. So this was, I would say, one of my favorite things that I've ever gotten to do was work with her on these. Okay. Sometimes there's just not enough time really, and to think of what can I do that's like this. You know, we have to make such quick decisions. Our turnaround time is from when we are supposed to get text with Harper's. Our turnaround time is, say, text comes in on Monday, and then 2 Fridays later, we are supposed to have all the art for the issue to the printer. It rarely happens like that, including on both ends. You know, sometimes writers turn things in late, or, you know, there's some sort of glitch and we don't get things exactly on time. Quite often we do get things on time, depending on how much we're pushing ourselves. We, you know, like we're just finishing researching this piece that a very straightforward piece. I can't tell you what it's about, but it will be in our August issue of Harper's. And instead of sort of doing a more straightforward photo story, instead of commissioning, we sort of did this vast research project to find some unexpected artwork to use with it. And in 12 pages, we ended up using 20 images. So, and that's just one story out of an 88-page issue, and it's just 2 of us. So that's what I mean when I say sometimes we just don't have time to, you know, explore options. Sometimes you have to just go with the first thing that feels right. So now I'm going to show you a book project from a few years back. Preston Ganaway is a photographer she was in Virginia. She's from South Carolina, and then she moved to the Bay Area in California. And I met Preston, so in a circuitous route, I met Preston because she had entered Critical Mass. I mean, I'm talking like 6 or 7 years ago, maybe even. And I absolutely thought her photos were incredible. I mean, they were I still love this photo story that she's done. It's a different one than what you're looking at here. But they just very much spoke to me. And they did not make the top 50. And that happens all the time. I saw them because I was a screener on the contest. Some of you probably know how Critical Mass works. It's a photo contest where there are about 20 screeners that go through everything, and your votes get averaged out, and then that's 700 photographers, 700 entries, and then from there it narrows down to 200, and then from there, at that point, like a whole panel of jurors joins the screeners. So the screeners continue on and judge again, and at that point, I believe it's like 150 or something people in the photo book world, gallerists, museum curators, photo editors, photo writers, you know, all sorts of people in the industry are looking at your work. So in terms of getting your work in front of people, that is one way to do it, one good way to do it. So she entered, she made the top 200. I saw her work at that point. She did not make the top 50, which I couldn't believe because it was my favorite. And, you know, I kept notes about it. And a few years later, when I started writing for the Slate photo blog, Behold, which is sadly no more, I pitched that photo story and I got to write about it. So I got to sort of meet her that way. And, you know, we became friendly via email. I had never met her. And at some point she reached out and she wanted to with help editing this book. And she asked me not to help her with it, but she asked me if I knew any designers, book designers in the Bay Area where she lives. And she didn't think of doing it remotely. She thought that would be too difficult, but I actually talked her into letting me design it with her and edit it with her and her partner, who's also a photo editor, Nicole Frugier, who's at the San Francisco Chronicle. And so I ended up flying out there, staying with them. And, you know, we went through the process of editing and sequencing the entire book over the course of, I would say, primarily over the course of a week, but it took longer than that, you know. So the story is kind of like, they lived in Virginia. She was working, they were both working at the newspaper there. And it was a story about this little community, Ocean View, that differently than a lot of beach communities had not gentrified and gotten expensive on the coastline. So there was very like mixed income living situations right on the beach, which was sort of different than anything she'd seen before. I would say like this was a very difficult project to edit because there was no natural through line, that we weren't using time. We weren't using sort of subjects. We didn't exactly have chapters. We sort of had a flux and a flow of tone and mood and energy and speed. And of course, color guided us quite a lot. Motion. But I mean, the agony of sort of letting go pictures that I got to love, you know, it was like killing my own darlings at a certain point. But, you know, one has to do it. I think I'm probably going to speed this up a little bit. So the process for this, when I got there, Nicole and Preston had already done quite a bit of editing. But we ended up digging back into their outs pile and pulling, you know, several things back in. My favorite way to edit is, you know, if you can do it, if you have space and the time, is to be able to sort of make small printouts of the images. And yes, Tom has given me the thumbs up. And you know, attach them to a board, to a wall, ideally to a wall that doesn't have to move. You don't have to, you know, take it down. You can just sort of tack things up and leave it there, move things around, stop looking at it, walk away, go away for days. You know, as I'll be walking by the wall, you know, things will start to strike me differently. Once you've looked at a pairing, you know, hundreds of times, it might not hold up. That is sort of the point of a photo editor, is like, you know, really sort of being able to digest these images And it is that, like, getting familiar as quickly as possible with the story, with the tone, with what the photographer is trying to communicate, and sort of translating that into what I feel is communicating that. So you can see it's more just sort of like a portrait of a place, really. Um, and that was that. Um, I guess I'll say also, I don't have any visuals for this, which is fine. There's a website. But for the other position that I have that Tom mentioned, doing archival research for Brief But Spectacular, which is a short interview series that airs on PBS NewsHour. That came about, so most of my freelance gigs have come about through basically somebody I knew, somebody I'd worked with, somebody in the industry I was friends with, quite often like a job that they couldn't take because they were doing something else. And that's how that job came about. So I had done a very small amount of footage research before, but of course, a lot of photo research and archival photo research. And so she, my connection had worked, she was a producer on that show. She worked with the production company, Second Peninsula, that produces that show. They co-produce it with NewsHour, for NewsHour. And she, called me up. I was on vacation. I hadn't talked to her in a while. So I thought, it's interesting, a phone call. What's that about? And so I answered, and she said, she asked me how busy I was, would I be able to talk to them about coming on as a picture researcher and a footage researcher. And so well, I'm not going to turn down just that ask. So because I was quite busy at that point in time, but then I spoke to them, and I just really got along with them. I had watched a bunch of the episodes leading up to talking to them, and they really, it's just a wonderful series. I wanted to be a part of it. They weren't asking for that many hours, and so I was able to work with them. And I started that 2.5 years ago, and that's been a bit of a learning curve because there's rights that I have to know about are different when it's being broadcast. It's news, so public domain, but how far does that go? And in what, and then sort of searching out footage archives has been fantastic. And they have done other projects. So they have also worked with PEN America. PEN America's guest host for their awards ceremony last year was Barack Obama. And so my colleagues got to be in the interview with him. I did not, because I am just the photo researcher. But, I got to pour through just tons and tons of photos to make what was otherwise a very boring looking interview, because it was done during COVID. So really just a bunch of talking heads, bring it to life. And that I get to do with them. It's wonderful. So with that, I think maybe we should see if there are questions, get to our questions.
Great. Yeah. So as I mentioned, thank you, Lisa. What I will remind everyone is that if you'd like to ask a question, please put it into the chat, and I'll then read the question to Elisa. I mean, I have a couple of my own. I think I'll touch on that. There's definitely the main idea, the one that you've already touched on, are these avenues for photographers to get their images in front of you to see it, so they're on your radar, like you said, the hashtagging, the contests that you're involved with, things like that. I'm guessing, I know I've seen that you're involved in portfolio reviews. If you could
Yes.
talk a little bit about the importance of those avenues, and maybe some that you didn't talk about already.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, Instagram is a huge way for me to find work, as are portfolio reviews, especially crucial are portfolio reviews, because I get to sit down with the photographer and really learn about the work. I get to see prints in person, which in a way isn't imperative for what I do, because the end product is, probably at most 8-inch wide print on, nonprofit paper. So, or it's on screen, maybe sometimes just, like 1,080 pixels wide. So, but, it changes everything to be able to see work in person, to experience, hearing about it straight from the photographer, certainly sticks better in my head. I've built many relationships that way. I've also built relationships with the other reviewers, and we trade, information back and forth. Whose projects have you seen here that you really loved? Maybe quite often, I haven't seen all of the same people, so I learn about photographers' work that way as well. So these things are really sort of like this sort of beautiful mess of imagery, and a whirlwind, really it is. But out of that whirlwind, come real relationships and real connections, and really the ability to sort of reach out, for the photographer to reach out to the people that they've met and follow up with them. Everybody gets my business card that comes to my table or approaches. They have my email address at that point, and they are free to submit. That is another way. I do encourage photographers to pitch to photo editors, to art directors, to blog writers, to photo blogs, just straight up, to have their work featured, especially when they have something to promote that's coming up. Say they know they're having a book published in 8 months or a year, get on that as soon as possible. For example, Harper's Magazine Works, we're about 2.5 months out. So we're just finishing our August issue right now. So if somebody pitched me something today, it would be, absolutely soonest September issue. We're closing the fall issue of Oxford American, and that's a quarterly. So that would be, already winter issue. So, and I think a lot of people, even in the industry, not everybody works ahead, quite in that way. Or you just don't really have the dates right if it's not your own schedule. And so, sooner, I think, is better. As soon as you're ready to share the work, do it. Do it in a targeted way. If you're not familiar with Harper's Magazine, you would want to look through the website, go get a copy of it, sort of see what type of things we do, and then figure out if it's worth your time to make the effort to reach out to me. When people reach out to me, like a cold email, I honestly have so much going on that I've become pretty bad at getting back to everyone. I used to be pretty good at it, at least sometime, like it could be months later. I'll still reply if it's in my inbox. I've emailed somebody after a year of nothing, One of my favorite stories that I like to tell about that is that, pretty well-known photographer, Rosemary Cromwell, she had photographed for Harper's, but I, at that time, wasn't involved in commissions. So I basically saw the work when I got the copy of the magazine. It sort of used to be structured differently several years back. And that's why that was happening like that. So she, I don't think, I don't know if she knew that I worked there or not, but she pitched me something for Oxford American. And she also said, by the way, I'm going to be, you know, in Miami, and then I'm going to be in Nebraska or something. What any photographer that's traveling and photographing should always do in any pitch, and then also on your Instagram. I've only seen it once where a photographer said currently in and their location in their bio, which I think is an amazing idea if you're looking for work that way. And so anyway, so Rosemarie emailed me. A year goes by. It was still in my inbox, like, oh, I gotta get to that. I gotta get to that. But other things keep coming up. Deadlines keep coming up. I finally, you know, write her, you know, happy 1 year anniversary of our email, of your email. I've been meaning to write back to you, you know, all of that. So then she tells me she's about to go to Cuba, where she photographed before, which I, you know, had seen that work and it's beautiful. And then, you know, 3 days later, we start an issue of Harper's, and I get all the texts, and there's a story about food insecurity in Cuba. Oh, well, Rose is in Cuba right now. Well, I don't know if we have the budget. We might need to find work. Maybe this story doesn't demand more than like one hero image, maybe a second small one. I don't know if we have the page space, et cetera, et cetera. So I go on a pretty extensive search for Cuba images and don't come up with anything at that time, years ago, that really fit the piece, that weren't kind of, we wanted it to be beautiful. We didn't want it to be very straightforward. Sort of stock journalism, like just, I don't know, trying not to put anybody down, but we wanted sort of a different take on it. Right. And Rose has the perfect style. I mean, she's it's just beautiful light. It's gorgeous little details, such rich color, you know, all of these things. Like, she's very familiar with the place and people. And so we ended up hiring her, and she did beautiful work for us. And that's all because I randomly emailed her after a year, but also because she said, oh, and now I'm going to Cuba. Right. She very easily could have not thought of telling me, you know, but she's good at that. She's very good at that. That's a really interesting
hint to be able to just saying where you are and where you're based out of. And I think that is especially because you mentioned that a few times, that you really want images, not just of people who are in the place and know the place, and to, I think, add most probably this layer of authenticity to the work. So I mean,
absolutely,
that's a great suggestion.
Absolutely.
I apologize. I am hopping around in the questions on the chat a little bit. I'm going right to the end because it has to do with what I was saying. But Margaret Alba asks, so to pitch photo editors, blog writers, who else should photographers be pitching to in general?
That is a good question. I mean, it depends on what your goals are. Do you want to, you know, are you trying to get a photo book published? If so, then you need to absolutely focus in on those, and that will take you a long time, a tremendous amount of hours, narrowing down what publishers to pitch to, looking at all of their different requirements. I see Swanee in here. Mary Virginia Swanson knows all about it. She can tell you everything. And yeah, so I would say that's a hard one, you know, that those are the most obvious things to me, would be like the blogs, the photo editors, the art directors.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, great. Yeah, I did want to say I saw Mary Virginia Swanson, Swanee, thank you for being here, and for giving the the link for Photolucida and where is it? There we go. Yeah, and Critical Mass. So I appreciate that. And one of our alumni mentions another one of our alumni who's that he's entered Critical Mass this year, and Stacy Swiderski, one of our alumna, is one of the judges. So we're
great.
just sorry to put all the connections to
That's great.
to the program, but that's great. And like you said, all the different people involved with these things. One of the questions we have, once you have found the person's work, is Don Parsison asks if you do get if a photographer does get a request for one of their photos, what's the sort of business side, the negotiating, the price that would that they could get for the images?
Yes, it absolutely depends on what venue, the magazine, the site, et cetera, that's trying to buy the use of your photograph. I mean, Harper's is a nonprofit. We will, like, we can't not budge. We definitely will work with a photographer. We always try to pay when we're using something editorially. We always do pay when we're using something editorially. We try to raise our rates, if not annually, as close to annually as we possibly can. It's difficult in this industry, as you all know. I would say, if somebody comes and asks for what for us would be, there is a such thing as too much money. It's like at that point we would have to move on.
Right.
So you have to sort of know your customer, basically. It's hard because where is the line of knowing, like, okay, you're being taken advantage of, but how far can you push? Like, sometimes you have to decide if there's a reason you need the particular exposure at that moment. And then if you do it for maybe less money than you would want, I would say then make as much out of that as you can. Don't just be featured and let it go. Post it everywhere, like post it again. Make as many like connections to it as you can for people to find it. Because it's all about that long game of,
that's right,
planting your work with other people so that, they'll sort of seed it out eventually. I think I'm getting way far away from what the question was.
That's it. I mean,
rates.
He was also asking if there
negotiating
were
rates.
The rates, yeah, and are there resources for that information? I think there are things. For different professional organizations about what rates are possibly for some of these things, but it's really like you're saying, the institution itself, I think that.
Yeah, it is.
I'm
not really privy to anything but, the publications that I work with. So I do know that most photo blogs don't pay. I do know that some of the magazine photo blogs do pay. I would say, make sure that nobody is demanding to use your work exclusively or keep any sort of like embargo on it for any amount of time if you're allowing that type of, publication to happen, or at least make it very brief. That would be my opinion. I do feel like you can always ask for more money.
Right.
Absolutely.
There is room to negotiate. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think so. I mean, yeah, I think you probably always should.
That's good to know. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That's good to know.
Yes. And actually, like, a fair number of photographers, that part of my work is also reaching out, and asking for permission to publish. And even, if I get an image straight from a photographer, they don't always ask. I'm also maybe more dealing with the fine art world in that respect. So I know that, photojournalists that I reach out to do always like that. They're schooled in that. They know to do that. They've got their invoice ready to go, which is great. I love that. And then, but also dealing with galleries, sometimes they don't follow up on me saying in the very first email, this is how much the fee is for this use.
Mhm.
And I have to sort of go back and sort of chase them about it. Remember to send an invoice, remember to send an invoice, which not everybody's going to do.
You want to get paid.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's,
Let's get you paid.
mhm.
So let's get your artist paid.
That's right.
Um, so yeah, I would say like definitely be on it, never be afraid to ask, and always ask for more money than they're offering. This is going to bite me
That's right.
like
Exactly.
next month.
But it is good
But
advice.
sometimes we have to say no, and
Right.
it's not fun.
Yeah, no, I mean, when you are, and that's okay, right? That you get
Yeah.
the answer of no, I can't go higher. That's not a rejection of some sort. It's positive, just what the budget is, and
Sometimes it
but
is just what the budget is. It's true. Yes.
on a more technical side, Jeff
Mhm.
Scott was wondering that you mentioned a keyword database for keeping track of the
Ah,
photos, and sort of what software specifically are you using in that case?
oh man. Jeff Scott, can you help me? I was using FileMaker when I was in the office.
Mhm.
And then when I went freelance, I no longer had FileMaker. So
Ah,
I was using a cheap version of FileMaker called Bento, which was great. It's just a very simple, like, photographer's name. Sometimes it would be like the name of the group show, keywords could be like all of the obvious things: tomato, salad, food, or I don't know, like all sorts
right.
of things. Poverty, health,
Mhm.
environmental, climate change, oh my God. So, just I keep it like very sort of dialed in based on the type of stories I know I'm always looking for. So it's very particular to my needs. Um, so I was using that, and then Bento went away, and now I'm back on FileMaker. I was also using Evernote for a while,
Mhm.
um, but Evernote is not ever. They all kind of, nobody's great. Like none of these things are perfect. So I've been trying to transition everything to Lightroom,
Mhm.
and keyword everything there, but uh, that's a massive undertaking. So I just keep putting it on the back.
Katrina
There's plenty of
Eisman's
other stuff
excited
that
to
I
hear
have to do before
that's
that.
what you're transitioning to. So that's good.
Yeah.
Great. Let's see. Just to let you know, Debbie Arlook is going to be in Sun Valley, Idaho, for 2 weeks, starting this
Okay.
weekend.
Hi,
As
Debbie.
she says, laugh out loud. And let's see. And somebody else is going to Greece. People are going to great places.
I
So
see who's going to Greece, I think.
there you go.
Hi. I'm actually writing this down, you guys. So thank you. Yeah. Who
um,
else? Who else we
let's
got?
see. That's it for places so far. Jeff Scott does say FileMaker is great.
Thank
Bento
you.
was made by FileMaker, according to Jeff.
Yes.
So
Yes.
let's see. Another question we've got for you, Lisa. Can you share an example of what an initial pitch looks like that ended up developing into you hiring a photographer? Ideally, someone you hadn't yet worked with.
Yes. So I will explain why, but I don't think that's actually happened to me.
Hmm.
So for many years, sort of house rules. Harper's was part of a union for a while. The reason I'm mentioning that is because as a freelancer, I couldn't be on the masthead.
Mhm.
So for years and years and years, I would say, oh, I still work at Harper's, and pretty much nobody knew that, even though I thought I made it clear on my website. Apparently, I did not make it clear enough. But so I wasn't getting tons of pitches. I still kind of don't get tons of pitches. Even when I was at Harper's, I didn't get a ton of pitches
Mhm.
because people will pitch directly to the art director. At Harper's, it's very easy to find, the information is right there. There are two people. Um, oh, here's one. Here's one. So I had been, this is very, very early on in my years at Harper's, and it took me completely by surprise. I don't know if this is a helpful story or not, but it's brief. I'll try to make it brief. It's Simon Norfolk, who's a brilliant photographer, whose work I worship. He I had been in touch with him just to publish one of his images in the reading section at Harper's, which is just, oh, you have an exhibition. This is an opportunity for us to feature your work, And so he had sent me an image and then he, the art director at the time said, oh, well, let him know we would love to work with him, and that, if he has any pitches, please send them to us. And so he said he would. And then so this is early 2000s, so the ancient times when people did use phones. And he called me in the office, and he completely took me off guard because that had never happened. And he sort of launches into this pitch, and I'm like furiously taking notes, trying to get it down. And he wanted to go to Crazy Horse, like the reenactment. There are two different reenactments that happen. One Indigenous people do, and other non-Indigenous people is like the one that everyone knows. And he wanted to sort of do this vast photograph of each one. And that was it. Like, we just said, okay, here's Simon Norfolk. Okay, here's our rate. He said, that's terrible, I'll do it anyway. And that he did it. So in terms of pitches that come my way that I end up like passing on to the art director, I used to just send sort of everything that seemed like it might be, something she could at least use for future if she wanted, or it wasn't sort of my department to screen, basically, like too much. But I still didn't get a ton of pitches. So the problem with pitches that I always is, again, I have so many different things going on that if I open the email just to sort of check and see what it is, and it's a lot of text, I usually mark it unread, star it, put it down with Rosemary Cromwell's email that I haven't seen in a year, and then hopefully get to it someday. That's the problem with that. So for me, an ideal pitch is one that I'm going to open. I'm going to write in the first 3 sentences, know what's going on. I'm pitching you the story. This is like the general crux of it. I know that's really, really hard to do, but that's the ideal. There are some, a couple images at the bottom, like either related work or if they've already done work on this project, that will sort of tell me, like, what is the style? What is their approach? Does it fit with us? Do I want to see more? Do I want to read like what I think should be then sort of like a more evolved pitch after those first 3 sentences? Sort of like, here's a longer take on it.
I mean, it's really just don't overwhelm a busy person. I mean, it's really the idea that.
But I've talked to photo editors that like getting a more
detailed,
evolved pitch because they don't want to sort of go back and forth. They want to know right away, how is the photographer writing about this? How are they approaching the subject and that type of thing.
But I guess that idea of just getting it up front and making sure that it is something, maybe there's more information to be gathered, to glean, and for people that want to see more, but that they can get it pretty quickly, and you can make a quick decision about your own reaction, as opposed to feeling like, oh, I just can't digest this right now. I'm going to have to put it somewhere where I have the time, which is not going to happen very often.
Right.
You'll suddenly have that time. So
that's exactly right.
Yeah. Let's see. And that was a question Alexis A had, was where can I learn to pitch my work? I think right here and now, or that's what you got a little bit of advice on.
But, I would say like a couple more things about that then to answer that. You do always want to make sure you've done your research in terms of what the magazine you're pitching to or place you're pitching to, what type of, what they've run recently. Like, look back if you can, like several months. Have they done a story similar to yours? do you see similarities between the photographers' styles that they hire and yours? That's a good indication that they might be somewhere good for you to pitch. Don't waste their time. It's sort of, because I will get, pitches like about places that we just published a story. Like if you looked at the website, it was right there. And it just makes them seem like they haven't done any work.
Right.
Then
Do the
it's just
research
sort of
beforehand.
which,
right.
and I get why that happens. I know we're all overwhelmed and busy, but it doesn't make me sort of eager when I get another pitch from them.
Right.
It's sort of like, let's see.
No, having the
Do some
focus,
research.
knowing who you're reaching out to and what they are looking for,
and what they've recently published, and
right.
making sure you're not treading that same ground.
Exactly, right.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks to Swanee for share follow-up that always ask if editors if they'll put your Instagram or URL in addition to the copyright in your name. Lisa always tries to share a path to your work by way of this idea of the long game. So appreciate that. And it's another reason to keep your keywording up on your Instagram account, because that pulls all that up. So we definitely,
absolutely,
we saw that the example that you showed so well, of the importance on that of being able to do that. I had one question for myself just about the how much of the process, when you're, especially with working at Harper's or another magazine, that's are you collaborating with the writer of the piece itself, or is the writer just completely detached from the art side and the images that get brought in with the image?
Almost always the ideal situation is to not be attached to the writer. It's almost always better that way. The times where it would be good to be sort of connected with them or involved is if they're profiling somebody who, like, their personal photos are going to come into it. You sort of want that connection then. Or for Oxford American, it comes up a lot because they are doing a lot of stories coming out of about small towns or somebody in these small towns throughout the South. And quite often it's like, oh, while you were there, did you see family photos around? Can we ask them to, maybe take pictures of their family photos so we can at least reference those, for an illustrator or something, right. Or send a photographer, there to take pictures
to create
of
those
these
images.
Things. Yeah. But generally, no, we want to read the edit and then, have our own interpretation of it visually.
Right. More about these ideas of marketing. Don Parison asks, is Photographers Marketplace still being published? And if so, is it a good resource? It's not one I know personally.
I mean, I've heard of it, but because I'm here as a freelancer and I don't do a ton of commissioning, I don't know. I feel like I hate to call on Swanee right now, but yeah, Swanee, do you know?
I was just checking. I don't know. It was published for years in print, a giant sort of block resource. And I can't imagine that with the degree of, or the pace, I should say, of changes right now, that kind of a print book would be as relevant as your own research online.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
A guest appearance.
Yeah. And I think, I guess I look to a little bit the future for you. That are there any sort of dream stories or images that you're hoping to get into a story that I'm sure there are. I mean, there's sort of a host of them, but what would those sort of dream scenarios be for you looking forward that maybe haven't happened before?
Yeah, I would. Well, I would say that, you know, there are probably tons of, I know, not probably, there are certainly tons of images that I'm just waiting for the opportunity for a story to come along where we can feature this, you know, instead of just publishing it like this is, I mean, I love doing that too, but there's something extremely satisfying about the text popping up that would fit this image so well. I cannot name any of them
Mhm.
off the top of my head because
No.
there are too many. But I would say also like the Philip Chung commission that I showed you guys of the
Yeah.
TikTok houses. That is my favorite type of commission to sort of, and that he fit in there fine, like that type of story, but to sort of send a photographer who doesn't seem like an obvious choice to go photograph a story, that's kind of, that is what I love. That's what I want to do more of,
Yeah,
to have these like odd pairings so that, you know, and eventually the viewer is seeing like a take on this subject that they never have seen before, you know, because it's this artist's unique way of seeing it.
exactly.
Somebody
I love
that normally wouldn't be commissioned, you know, even.
exactly.
That's
good.
my dream project.
I love it. Well, I hope it comes soon.
Thank you.
That's great. Well, I want to have you all join with me in thanking Elisa for an amazing talk. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you all.